In this video, we're going to be learning about haptics. Haptics is a feature that Apple provides that allows users to track their actions on their iPhone by way of vibrating in various ways. There are two options that Apple provide us with. The first one is relatively easy and simple, with the second one being a bit more complex and complete. In this video, we'll be covering the easy and simple version, with the complex and more complete version to be done in another video. Before we get started, as always, it would be helpful if you could like, subscribe, and comment as to what you enjoyed during this video. Okay, let's get started. Now, it is important to note that haptics only work on a real physical iPhone, not on a simulator in XCode or on a Mac or an iPad. So, to demonstrate that haptics working, we will create a simple increase and decrease counter. So, the first step to do this is we will need to track the increases and decrease buttons. So, for this, we will create two @state variables, one for the increase and one for the decrease. So we will type in @state private var increase, and this will obviously need to be an integer, and we will make it equal to 0 to begin with because it's a counter and it's beginning at 0. Then we will create the decrease counter, so we will type in @state private var decrease count equals 0. Then we will need to display the taps and the increases and decreases that have been done by the user, so we will create a computed property to keep track of the tabs and the increases and decreases so the total can be displayed. Now obviously the increase and decrease @state variables that we created were integers, so we must conform this computed property to an integer type. So we will type in eventually, once we've typed out the notes, the variable will conform to the type of int, which is the Apple syntax for integer. So for a computed property, we do not need @state, so we can simply type in var and then the variable name of total taps, and this will conform to the integer. And we'll just use camel casing there. So we will do increase count plus decrease count. Nice. So now we've got the computed property, we can now move on to the UI and making this look nice. So we will literally just have a simple taps counter and then two buttons, one for increase and one for decrease. So we'll remove the default VStack that we get when we set up a UI. We'll put all of it in a VStack with spacing of 20. Then we will have text to show the number of taps. So we'll do text, quotes, taps, colon, and then we will use the string interpolation of total taps, of backward slash and then brackets, and putting in our computed property of total taps. We will give it a font of headline to make it stand out. Then, beneath this, we will want to show the buttons for the user to increase the number of taps. So we'll put these buttons in a H-stack. A H-stack just means a horizontal stack, so the buttons will be on the same line together. We'll add some spacing so that they're not cramped together, and then for the button, instead of doing button and then brackets, we'll do button and a label. I like doing this because I prefer this type of layout and it allows more modification in future projects. So we'll create the increase button, and when the user taps the increase button, we will want to increase the number of counts or taps by 1. So we'll also need a label of increase as well, and this indicates to the user that if you tap it, it increases the taps by 1. Then we will need to do the same thing for the decrease button. Notice how the increase button and the decrease button both have labels and they are within the H-stack. This allows us to have the buttons side by side, and as you can see now, we have a nice, very simple button layout, and it works when you increase or decrease. However, if you have tried this on a real physical iPhone, you will notice that the haptic feedback does not come back. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to implement a sensory feedback modifier with a feedback and a trigger argument. For the feedback, I will be doing a success modifier, and the trigger will be the increase count, so that when the user increases the count or decreases the count for the respective buttons, we will get a success or an error haptic feedback. I personally prefer to use success or error, as to me the increase or decrease arguments within sensory feedback are far too similar and don't really distinguish, and therefore wouldn't help people who are perhaps visually impaired. Okay, nice. And with that, we've now created a very, very simple taps counter where you can increase and decrease. And then you'll notice that if you try this on a real physical iPhone, you will actually get your phone vibrating with success or error, depending on whether you press increase or decrease. And again, it's important to note that this will only work on an iPhone. And with those 3 simple steps, creating the @state variable, the computated property, and implementing it in the UI, we created a nice simple version of Haptics that can be used as a template for future projects. We will be doing another video later for the more complex and complete version. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.